Hi, everyone. Thank you for spending an afternoon with us. I'm Art Suwansang, BenQ Ambassador, and I am super honored to be hosting today's program with Bert Monroy, our really great expertise in photorealistic artistry. I mean, his Photoshop work is just absolutely amazing, and he has been inspiring me for over 2 decades, and I'm sure he's going to inspire many of us too. So today's program will be Photoshop creating photorealistic images from scratch, and Bert definitely goes through everything from scratch. In fact, some of the details he's about to show you and some of his images are totally mind-blowing. If you haven't seen his work before, you're in for a treat. So Bert, thank you for joining me today and presenting for BenQ. I mean, this is an AccuColor program, and I'm super thrilled that I could be hosting you in this webinar.
Well, it's really good to be here. I'm really looking forward to this. All right.
Awesome.
All right.
Yeah, by all means, Bert, please take it away. So just one quick thing I want to mention before is that if you have any questions, leave them in the chat pod or Q&A. I'll be monitoring the question. If they're relevant, I will briefly interject during the program. If not, we'll keep the questions towards the end for Bert, and I'll be reading it out to him. All right. So Bert, please take it away and inspire all of us.
My name is Bert Monroy, as Art just said, and I'm also a BenQ ambassador, and I'm going to show you a bunch of the stuff that I do now. I've been digital since 1984. I've been in art. I was an art director and a creative director in ad agencies in New York back in the day, and I've been an artist my entire life. Back in 1984, my partner said that we have to computerize. And I said, what am I going to do with a computer? And he said, no, there's a new computer coming out you could do your layouts on. So I went to see this little thing called a Macintosh. And yep, I flipped. I flipped because of a mistake. I was playing there and I did a little box and I moved it. I said, okay, yeah, I can see doing layouts on this thing. But then all of a sudden the screen went into these big black and white squares. And I said, I called the guy over, look, I broke this thing. And he said, no, you just went into fat bits. Fat bits? I had zoomed in to the pixel level, and that clicked. That said, this is it. This is the future. It was only a little 9-inch screen. It was black and white, but I felt that this was the way, and I got so engrossed in it that I totally gave up the advertising business and went completely into the Mac, and I've been digital ever since. I started playing with Photoshop 2 years before Adobe knew it existed. So that's why I was able to co-write the first book on Photoshop. But what I'm going to show you now is how I create what I do, okay? Now, there's more to it than just knowing Photoshop and Illustrator, which is my pencil on the canvas. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you all the steps from the inspiration into all the preparation and the planning and then actual techniques, okay? So to start off, let me talk about my actual system. Now, back here, there's a little Mac Studio. Now, that is a wonderful new machine. Going back to that little 128K Mac, this guy is really powerful. I was finally able to make files as big as I could comfortably. Because many of my files, it got to the point where if I hit save, I can literally go to lunch and come back later and maybe read a magazine before it was done saving. Whereas now everything seems to be instantaneous. Now, I work on these machines here. There's 4 screens here. Let me share my screen and show you what it is. Instead of turning things around, I got it set up here. Let me share this. Okay. And now let's go over here to Photoshop. And there's my setup right here. Okay. Let me move this little guy down here out of the way. Okay. So what we have here, this guy right here is my Cintiq. This is a Wacom Cintiq. I draw directly on the screen. And these 3 monitors up here are BenQ monitors. These are my viewing monitors. Now, this one here, this is not always the layout that I have, but this particular one I had shot and I decided this is the one I'm going to show. I was working on this particular piece here called Jazz School, which I'll show you later. This is the photograph that inspired it. This is the work in progress. You notice there's a lot of things still missing here. This screen here has currently Bridge, and Bridge has my reference materials for that particular sign, which I'm working on here. This monitor here has a close-up of one of the things that allows me to see certain details close up. And then here, I'm really zoomed in on the actual image. So as I work here, it'll automatically also come up here and start to form. When I start pasting things into this file, I'll see them in real time so I can see how it's looking compared to the art. Now, these particular images that I have here are, let me get rid of this guy here. Let's get this out of the way. But my layers are back here. All right, let's get layers. All right, there, right here. So this monitor here is the PD 3200 UT. This is a 32-inch monitor, which is mostly my viewing monitor for the main reference and comparison to the art. This guy in the middle here is the 3420 QB. This is the aspect ratio, gives me really good definition when I'm working on one of my panoramas. But this guy here will have usually basically my my reference material, because I look straight up and down when I'm looking at stuff and so on. And the guy on the right here is the PD 3220 UT. This one I usually will see at the end. This is my main viewing monitor for the final art. I will go to 100% zoom so I can see how the detail is working and so on. And then the guy in the middle, of course, is the Wacom Cintiq, which is also 32 inches. This guy's 34. The other three are 32. This one allows me to go and work directly on the screen with a touch-sensitive stylus that performs the same way I used to work with brushes and pencils and such. So it's kind of bringing me back to the way I was trained, but working digitally with no mess. All right, so now let's start talking about how I create what I create. The first thing that comes to mind is, of course, is the inspiration. Now, years ago, I used to travel 2-3 times a month. So there was plenty of chances for all kinds of inspiration. I would go to all kinds of places all over the world, and I would take a million pictures, and they would inspire me to do a painting. Now, since COVID, I haven't traveled very much. In fact, I've had one trip in the last 3.5 years. So I've relied on old shots for the last few years to go in there and close that down, to go in and get inspired to do something. So I'm going to show you how that works. Now, I'm working from photographs. Sometimes I work from life, but I'm working from photographs. So here's a particular thing that I worked on. All right, so now I took the shot, and here's the shot itself. All right, this is the shot that I took. And let me close this down. Okay, now, I was at the scene. This is a street in Warsaw. Now, the cameras have a tendency to react differently to different kinds of artificial light. This particular light was casting a greenish glow. Usually in photographs, if you look at like buildings in the background somewhere, they'll look like little orange windows. Okay, it's the way it's dealing with incandescent light. My paintings are more like being there. So I don't rely that much on the photograph. The photograph is purely for examples of where things are. Also, there's a distortion. You know how the pole's going to the side there like that, and this is going in? Okay, so photograph isn't exact. Now, the detail on the lamp, I couldn't go back to Warsaw and see what that lamp looked like. So what I did is I went to Photos, Apple Photos, and I went to Location. And right there, you can see that I could see that's exactly where that shot was taken. It was on the corner of that and that. Don't ask me to pronounce that because I couldn't begin to. But it was right there in the corner of that. So what I did is I then went to Google Earth and opened up that corner. There I am. I'm standing on the same corner, almost at the exact same angle. And then from that, I went in there and I just looked for a better angle for the light where I'm going to get the full detail of the light. Then I zoomed in on it and got this shot here. This gave me all the details that I needed so I can get the details in the lamp, which I can't see here because it's so dark up there. But if you're standing there looking at this, you would see that. That light just blocks it all out. So this gives me the reference. Once I have the reference, I can then start working on it. Now, now you notice that the wall is beige, whereas here it looks green, and this one is a little lighter. See, you could see a difference in those two, but they're not the right colors. So once I had all that information, I knew what I had to paint. So I went in there and created this. Let me just bring this guy out here so we can compare the two in a second. I'm going to open up the final piece right here. And here it is. There's the painting. Now you notice the distortion is gone. The colors are truer to the real place. All the detail is there. Those weird glares that got caught up in the camera are gone. So you can see that this and everything is straight on. See, the way you would see it if you were standing there rather than the angles that the camera picked it up at. So here you see the painting based on what I saw, what I felt, and so on. You can see there's all kinds of details in there. But basically, I got those details from studying the lamp in Google Earth. So let's get out of that. So the first thing is, of course, the research. Now, there's other kinds of research that comes into play. Let me show you another one here. This is Venetian Night. Now, here you're going to see where I really deviate from the original. Okay, so here's what inspired the painting right there. My wife and I took a bus, which is a boat in Venice, and went to the last stop. We wanted to see where the people lived rather than where all the tourists go. So we went to the last stop and we found this little spot. Now, it's kind of gloomy. It doesn't look like Venice. It looks like one of the many flood scenes we've seen this year on the news, but it is Venice. I wanted to make it look more like Venice. What really attracted me here was that single light showing on the water, which you see how orangey it all looks, because that's the way it deals with that kind of light. But I wanted the buildings to look more like a Venetian scene. So the first thing I had to do is I had to go in here and do some changes to this thing. Now, one thing that I did, and let me show you here, I'm going to double click on this guy, which is going to bring me into, this is an Illustrator file, but I'm just going to show it to you here. In fact, I should show it to you in Illustrator. Let me just show it to you in Illustrator. And I have Illustrator open down here. Okay, which is waiting for something else I was going to show you. But here, we'll go into prep, and we go to Venetian Night and light direction. Okay, so what I created here is like an aerial view of the scene. Now, one thing I wanted to do right off the bat is to take that balcony that you see and extend it. Now, since I made some changes to the actual building, the light is going to have to cast some shadows. So what I did is I created a light source, and then I created a bunch of lines that can easily move. I can move these lines around. These are light, see? So what I did is I put them at specific spots so I could see where this shadow would be cast on the wall, where the shadow of the balcony would be cast on the wall. You can see it's just hitting the edge of the windows right there. So this gave me an idea of where my shadows should fall. So I did this little light study right here. Going back to Photoshop, and we'll open up the actual painting, and you'll see that it looks very different from this right here. There's the painting. Now you see that the lighting is more like what your eye would see. Notice the balcony's been extended and made a little more ornate. I made the poles that people usually associate with Venice rather than these ones that are here. And the colors of the light are more like what you would see in reality. And also the camera just didn't pick up this detail back here. I was able to get that detail actually by doing this. I just went into this file here. I went into levels right here, and I just lit them up. Let's go all this dark stuff here and lighten it up. See, and there I can see that there's more to it. See? So I can see that there was buildings back there, but I couldn't see detail. It doesn't matter because everything here does not exist. I've had people tell me, "Oh, I know that place. I've been there." No, you haven't, because all these buildings are made up. They're based on the originals, but they have details that I added just to make them look a little more kind of like you would see in Venice. I got all the little damages on the walls and so on, the little bricks and all that. So a lot of it is made up. A lot of my paintings are actually things that I've made up along the way. But there you can see where I had to do a study just to see that the shadow, there it is, just touching the edges of that window. Because that's the way I planned it, that's the way the shadows would fall. All the shadows were planned all the way across the building. So that's another little bit of planning. There are times where I'll actually go and make little models and stuff. Let's go see one of those kind of things. Now, back here in prep again, Le Dome. Now, here's another one that doesn't look much like the real thing. Now, let me go in here and open up the reference. There it is. This is what inspired the painting. Now, when you look at it, okay, well, the trees are dormant. There is that distortion caused by the camera. I didn't want this pole here, so I wanted the trees to be alive. I wanted the feeling of Paris rather than what the camera caught that particular night. Now, looking at this closely, you see, like, for instance, here on the side, like these dark things over here. Yeah, they're windows, but there seems to be something there. There's like a little circle over here. You can kind of make it out. There's something going on there. Not sure what it is. So what I did is I'll go right down here and let me see if I can get to my Google Earth. And I can't because all these things are in the way. Let me move these guys around out of the way. I don't think you can see that thing. Okay. All right. And let me move this guy out of the way. Zoom puts all these things in the way, you know. All right. So here we are in Google Earth Pro. And I'm standing on that corner. Here's the restaurant right here. Now, when you look over here, there's those windows. You see, there's those dark windows. But what they really are is they're leaded glass. And you can see through them to the restaurant inside. So I actually take walks. If it's something I painted here in Berkeley, well, I can easily go down to that spot and take pictures or look at it and so on. But I couldn't go back to Paris just to see what those windows look like. So here's a case where I take a walk virtually in Google Earth and see what the detail is, and I can see what's going on there. So once I have that stuff in there, I can go in there and start creating the painting. So back in Photoshop here, we'll open up the leaded glass. And here's the leaded glass itself. Now there's other scenes here. Here's the references that I was using from it. And here's the Photoshop file of the windows themselves. There's the shapes. These are the actual shapes. What's going to happen inside, that's a whole nother story. Let's open up the actual painting and compare it to this guy. And you'll see that it's more the feeling than what the camera caught. So we'll go right in here and open up the painting. There's the painting. You can see that it's totally different from what was there. See, the sky is different. The building has more life. And looking down here, you can see that there's those windows. There's the leaded glass windows, and you can see inside. Now, this guy right here on the side, which we'll look at it right here, there's mirrors here. Looking at the scene in Google Pro, you can see that it is mirrors. Now, one bad thing about using Google Street View is, look, this is the top of a van, which means you were standing there on a ladder and holding your camera up in the air. The camera is on top of a car, so you're not getting a real eye view level. So by using Google Street View to see what's here is not going to give me an accurate view. So I needed to go in there and figure out what is seen in this particular area. So this is going to seem a little complicated, but it is necessary to make things look right. I'm going to show you what happened here. First thing I did was to go into Google Street View, and I did an aerial view right here, an aerial view of the scene. And what I did is put this box here, and I put a little mirror right there. And I put and this actually is a building from that Venetian scene you saw before, but I just duplicated it many times just to create some buildings. I put some matchboxes to be the cars, and I created this scene. That little mirror right here, I can look in and see exactly where I'm seeing in that mirror from where I'm standing. I put the camera right where I needed it to be. There you can see the angles are similar. So I could see what is being reflected there. I then plotted the course on the overhead view in Google, and I came up with this scene here. That's the street. There's the restaurant, and there's the street, and I did a close-up. And there's a close-up right there. Here we go. Now I knew exactly what's going to be visible there. And I have another file here, which I actually forgot what it is. What is this one? Oh yeah, this is one of the arts. This is one of the files, this storefront right here. Okay, let's open that. And there it is. There's the art. You notice that it's in reverse because it is a reflection. So that's the beginnings of the building. Now, when we look at the painting itself, and let's go to full screen on this guy and get close on that, we come in here close and we see that now the reflection, there's the building in there, and you can see the top floors, and there's that sign that was down the street, and here's the truck that's down the street here, and so on. So we're getting an accurate eye view or eye level view of what's reflected in those mirrored areas. These four are glass, and there are posters in the actual store. And what I did in there is I put in old commercial pieces that I've done during the years. I have to use my own work, so there's no legal problems there. So I created this reflection by just going in there and making a little study with some models and so on. And just to give you an idea here, the detail, you can see the food, the little clams and the oysters, they're all in there, which in the actual photograph, you can't see at all. So don't reference, there you can see there's the food. Can't really see what it is, but that is food. It just doesn't look like it. All right, let's close these guys down. Okay. So now, let's go out of here, back to prep. And Fog City. Now, Fog City, let me show you the painting. And I mentioned models a second ago. Okay, this is one of my panoramas. And there is a lot of detail here. Like, for instance, way up here, there's this little plane up there, see, flying. But right here, this is what's important. This is Sutro Tower in San Francisco, okay? Now, I couldn't get the angles right, definitely not from the scene itself. And I needed to see exactly how these things work and how they react to the setting sun over there. So what I did is I actually created a little model. I just took some sticks, some little wooden sticks, and made a little triangle. And I made a little triangle there like that. So I could move these guys around and see how they reacted to each other and how they reacted to the light coming from this side. Now, this is just a picture of the model itself. I was holding it in my hand and just studying it as I was trying to see how exactly the light would hit these supports here. So I knew that the highlight would be on this side, and I knew how dark it would be over here and so on. So I would get accurate lighting by studying reality based on a model rather than the scene itself. Okay. And finally, on this prep business here, let's see, I got one more, which is perspective. Now I'm ready to start the image, okay? Creating perspective is very important. Let me open up a piece here. This is Times Square. This is 4 years of work right here. It's 5 feet by 25 feet. The finished file, flattened file, is 6.25 gigabytes. Give you an idea how big this guy is. But there's a lot of detail going on here. So let me just go in here and come in here and start getting a little closer. And way down here, you see all the windows. You can see inside the windows. You can see what's going on and so on. Now, I took various shots to see different parts. I didn't actually shoot a panorama. I just took shots of buildings and what they would look like. I then had to create the whole thing as if I was standing right there looking, okay? And there is a lot of detail. Like if you get in real close here to my son's eyes right here, this is my son here, and we get real close, you can see the reflection of what he's looking at, see? You see the little reflection in there. And I'm over here taking a picture of my wife, and of course she is in the camera as well. See, there she is. So all the detail is there. The perspective was very important. So I had to go in there and create the perspective. In Illustrator, what opened up a second ago when I opened it up is the file for the perspective of every building. Now, if I open up the layers here, you can see that every piece is in its own layer. Every individual building. Now, I created an Illustrator, one reason being that the sheer size of the file is one thing, and figuring out the perspective, the vanishing points are way beyond the 25-foot direction here, way out here. So I did it in Illustrator, which is resolution independent, and anything I do here, I can easily blow up without any loss of detail. And I created all my perspective lines. See, all the perspective lines are in there for every individual building, including this little guy here, which I'll show you what that is in a few minutes. But every perspective line was created. So now, back in Photoshop, let's go see. Right here is a painting called Amsterdam Mist, right? Now, I created perspective for this particular file here. There are paths right here. There's perspective lines, see? Now, what happens is I have these, and then I create vertical lines for where buildings are. I will then take this file and duplicate it. It's a blank file. When it starts off, it's just a blank file, no buildings, nothing. But I've plotted out where my vanishing point's going to be, and everything else gets built from that. So now, this file gets brought over to another file, and then I select the area that I want, and I crop it. The paths will still be there. They won't get cropped, but I'm not working on such a large file. So this building here is this one right here. So now you notice that it's just this area. This is all I need. Here are the perspective lines. See, there's the perspective lines. So I can easily go in there, and let's get in real close. You can see what happens. And I'll grab one of these lines and we'll move it down. And you'll see that everything is following the perspective. See, everything is starting to conform. As it gets closer to the bottom here, you'll see that it starts to get straight. See, and everything is following the perspective all the way down. So the first thing I do is to establish the vanishing points, multiple vanishing points. And in fact, in Times Square, there was quite a few. There was a one going up Broadway, one going up 7th Avenue, and two going up on either side of 46th Street where I was standing, or rather 44th Street where I was standing. Now, there was even more involved because of the fact that Broadway is going at an angle. So all the angles, the sides of the buildings had different vanishing points. So that was pretty complex. This one is a single vanishing point. So establishing the perspective was real easy. Perspective is crucial to make things look real. If they don't, they're going to look out of whack, and even the untrained eye is going to look at it and say, hey, that doesn't look right. So it's very important to establish perspective. Okay? So now, let's start creating things. Now, I mentioned before that Illustrator is my pencil on the canvas. Photoshop is the paint. So I create a lot of the paths in Illustrator. As you saw, creating all the paths here. Let's leave this guy open for a second. And I'm going to open up something and just show you paths. Wrong place. Okay. Got this little ice cream guy here. Here's a little ice cream. This is in Times Square, believe it or not, and you're going to get an idea why it took 4 years. All right, so we'll go in here, and you see that everything is in its own layer. Okay, everything is in its own layer. Let's go up here. We get a little more room here. Okay, let's just see the background. And there's the paths. So there's all the individual paths that can easily be manipulated. Sometimes I create it right here in Photoshop. Sometimes I create it in Illustrator, and you'll see why Illustrator is much more important for these kind of things. But I'll create all the individual shapes. Then I start to filled them. Like there's the base. Now these I didn't name. Usually I name them, but I knew this was going to be really small, so it didn't matter. Click, and every part was there. And then this top one is the composite file of all of them. So I created this little ice cream. There are quite a few little ice creams. So let's see, there's here, by the way, is the this is the scene in Bridge where I had all the reference material for Mr. Softy Truck. See, there's a little Mr. Softy Truck. Now, there's the sign. See, there's the ice creams. There are more ice creams. There's a whole bunch of them. And there's the sign. Here's the other ice cream choices. See, they were all created same way. And then here's the sign in the window. See, that's the little sign. Just like the sign that we saw in the reference shots. So I created all that stuff. So then I went in there and created the actual truck. Now, where is this in Times Square? Okay, let's go look at Times Square. And there it is, way over there. So that ice cream cone is that little thing right there. There it is. That little tiny thing took all that work, but it has to be there to make it look real. Remember a second ago when I was showing you the perspective lines? There were all these little, there was a little box with little lines. Well, that's this here. See, the vents. They have to follow the perspective also, or else they're going to look wrong. So all those little lines were guides so that I can create the lines for the perspective of the truck, the little vents. Gives you an idea. So the paths are how I create the shapes. That's how I start creating all the shapes. Now, Illustrator has a lot of features that Photoshop doesn't have. Let's go to Illustrator and show you some of those. Okay, this is one of the buildings in Times Square. This is that building way in the back where I showed you inside the windows. Okay, now all these windows, there's so many things going on here. That's the beauty of Illustrator. I didn't have to create all of them. All I had to do was create one little window, just like that, right? Then I could say, well, I'm going to take that window and I'm going to make a copy of it straight across like that. Now, like that, I'm going to say Command D, do it again, do it again, do it again. Then I can take all those, copy them down here, and say, do it again, do it again, do it again. And then you can see how many different windows I can create within minutes. Okay, so all these, I created one and then just did all those duplicates all the way down as far as I needed. Same thing on the side here, though these were then distorted into the perspective. But here it was real easy having that feature of transform again. Do whatever you did last and hit Command D, Control D on a PC to make it happen. Now, I'm not going to open up the painting because it's going to waste time, but I'm going to go and show you this little thing. This is from another painting called Lights, Lights in Munich. But I'm going to go in here and just show you this. Now, this is the side of one of the buildings. Usually I don't add color in Illustrator, but I did it here so you can really see what happens. These are all individual paths which have been grouped together. Now, they're going off in the distance here. It's not straight on. So therefore, perspective is going to mean that the furthest window is going to be smaller, visually smaller than this one here. If you're looking straight on, they're going to be the same size. But since we're looking at it at an angle, they're going to get smaller as they get further away. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to duplicate this guy down to here. Put him right there. And let's get real close so we get everything just right. And move him down so he's right there on the line there. And up here, I'm going to shrink this guy down. Shrink it down so that these guys are right in the, and it's jumping here. Let me get a little closer where I get really accurate. There we go. Because now they're both touching the lines in the same way. See? This one's smaller than that one. Okay, if you're not sure, here, you can see it is smaller because it's further away. So now what's going to happen is I'm going to take this guy and this guy. I'm going to select both of them. I'm going to select both of those. Okay, and I'm going to come up here. I'm going to say the object, and I'm going to say blend. Make blend. See, it created all these. I'm going to go back into blend and say blend options. And what I want is a specified number of steps. And what I need is 2 more because it's 4 windows. Click OK. And there you can see that I have 4 windows, and you can see that they're all following the line. So they're equally getting smaller in the distance as they get further away. So it saves a lot of time to have to go and create each one and shrink it down. No, I just create one, duplicate it over, and then let Illustrator go in there and shrink all the paths accordingly, proportionally, to give me what I need. Those paths then go into Photoshop, where I add the colors and reflections and so on. So Illustrator has all kinds of features which make things a lot easier. Another important one that I like is this one here. Let's just say I create this path over here, right? I can go in here, and under the eraser, there's a scissor. So I can say, cut it right there. I've actually cut that so that I can go in there and select that point and move it over here. Now I could take both of these points here and I can join them. Command J, boom, and it joined them. Another feature that isn't in Photoshop, at least not yet. But it has a lot more control for your paths when you're creating something. Also, it's a lot easier on memory when you're doing very complex elements. So I tend to go into Illustrator to create all the different shapes, which then those paths get brought into Photoshop. In the case of perspective, those paths are immediately stroked in a layer, which I call perspective. Then those same lines are then used to select and to make fill it with gradients or whatever is necessary to create the actual shapes in the scene. So that gives you an idea of some of what Illustrator can do and makes it easier for planning things. Now, let me just give a little disclaimer here. I got an hour to cover what would normally take me about, I'd say about 4.5 months. So I'm rushing through things, and the best thing to do is to get in there and start playing with these things just so you can really understand what's going on. So now let's start going into Photoshop and looking at some of those details. One of the most important things about Photoshop, and let me, I got a bunch of stuff open here. Let's start closing things. Anybody feel like some ice cream now? All right, close that. Let's, yeah, we can close Times Square. Okay, and the ice cream. Don't save. Okay, we got a lot of things we've been opening. So let's go over here, and here's a painting that I did recently. And this particular painting was kind of fun because when I used to work traditionally, I used to, in fact, let me just stop sharing here for a second. What I used to do is I would work on a 15x20 Bainbridge board. There's a 15x20, which is divisible by all the standard framing sizes, and I would work on that board, okay? My paintings are all 15x20 at 480 pixels to an inch. That's the resolution I work at. Now, 15x20 was standard, and it was great. But in the old days, when I wanted to get more detail, I would go to 30x40. Bigger, twice the size. I couldn't do that with the computer. In fact, the dome that's seen in Paris was the first time I tried to do a 30x40. The computer completely choked up. It said, no, you can't do that. I settled at 22.5x30, which gave me a lot more room for a lot more detail, but it wasn't the 30x40 that I was used to. When I got to the little Mac Studio over here, I decided to go to 30x40, and sure enough, I was able to create it. And what I created was this particular file you're about to see now. Let me share my screen again. Okay, and back in Photoshop here. I'm going to open up, let's see, we're in layers. And actually, let me open up in art. jazz school. Here it is. This was created 30 by 40. Okay, so I was finally able to get all the detail that I wanted. Okay, detail like you come way down here and look in these windows. You can see what's in those windows. These are my paintings, by the way. These are my paintings. This building has a lot of people with my paintings. See, of course, it's all made up. And way down here, see that truck about to cross the street there, turn the corner? Okay, this was the one downside to 30 by 40. I was able to create all this detail, but when I went to print it on a 64-inch printer, well, it didn't work. That little truck back there was just a tiny little dot that you couldn't see. So much for working at 30 by 40. But anyway, if I do another one at 30 by 40, I won't have such tiny details. It'll have a lot of detail, but it won't be that tiny. So now this particular piece here, I want to talk about layers. Now, my files are very heavily layered. In fact, the overall layers of that Times Square is about 750,000. So that's quite a few layers. But I want to show you here some of the features of layers. All right, so I'm going to start off with this car right here. Here's the file where the car was created. Everything is created in its own file. I don't paint in the actual main file because it's just too big and too time consuming. And I want to get more detail. I also work at 200% of what I need. So this car here, which happens to be my car, is a little bigger than what I needed. So when I shrink it down for the final image, then it has even more detail. So here you can see that all the layers are here and they are named, and you notice that there are folders with stuff. Now, I want to talk about masks. Now, a mask is a really cool thing, okay? It allows you to hide parts of an image. Now, when everything is done right here like this, I'm going to go in here and do my composite file. Now, what I do is I come up to the top right here, and these are some other pieces that are in there. Okay, so when I do go up here and at the top of this, and I say merge, here we go, merge visible. See what happened? It merged them all together and they went away. Let me undo that. I always want to keep my layers. Why? Because I like to repurpose things. Let's just say I want this same car with a different license plate and maybe some color, and I want it somewhere else. Because I still have all the layers intact, I can easily go in there and modify any parts of this image and play with it and reuse it. So let me do that. Let me do that thing again. Let me undo that. Let me turn that off. And I'm going to hold down the Option key this time, or the Alt on the PC, and do the same command. I'm holding down the Option key, and I go in there and say merge visible. See what happened? It created a whole new layer, but left all my original layers intact. So now I'm going to go and look at just that layer. So come down here, and I can give it a mask. Now that Option button, Alt button, is the modifier key. Now, it's not usually documented, but that affects so many things, including filters. Some filters will have a completely different effect if you hold down the Option key, as I'll show you a little later. But holding down that Option key allows you to change the way things work. So I'm going to click on that. So all we see is that car. There it is, the car. Now I'm going to give it a mask. When I click on it, it gives me a mask. See, it's the white mask. Let me undo that. I'm going to hold down the Option key and say, give it a mask. Notice the mask is now black, which completely hid the image. Masks work from white, which shows the contents of the layer, to black where it hides. And there are 254 levels of gray in between. Level of gray, level of visibility. So if I was to throw a gradient into the mask, right now I'm in the mask. See, I'm in the layer, now I'm in the mask. If I was to throw a gradient in there with this, and let's select a standard gradient. Actually, let's use the yellow. Let's see what it does. Okay, we'll go in here and through a nice little gradient going straight across. And there, you can see the area that's black, because we're in a mask, it doesn't see the yellow. Because we're black, see, it's hidden. That area is hidden, and it's gradually through the grays being visible to this side that's visible. Now, if I wanted to see more visible here, I can take my paintbrush, and right now it's white, and say, well, I don't want to hide this area here. And I got to set to 60%. Let's go to 100%. And I can say, okay, show me this area here. See, I'm painting in the mask. But I want to hide the license plate. So I switch to black, and I can say, hide the license plate. So the masks allow me to do all kinds of stuff. So now, let's throw this guy away. We don't want to use it. Okay. I'm going to go in here, and I want to see through the window, because back here, there's a scene. There's the rest of the scene, right? And there's little garbage cans over here in the front. Okay. That particular thing right there is the see-through, see? Now, people have said to me, well, why don't you just make the windshield transparent? Well, because the fact that the body of the car is one solid layer. So if I make the windshield transparent, all I'm going to do is see inside, okay? It's going to be the gray or the white in this particular case. So what I did is I created an entire different layer called see-through, in which I painted it with gray. Makes it real easy to go in there and select that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and give that layer a mask. And what I'm going to do is in that mask, I'm going to go in there and fill it with a 50% gray. So I'm going to say the foreground color, which is black, and I'm going to just go in there and say, well, 40%. Click OK. And there you can see that now we can see through it. Okay. Now, I'm going to go in there and actually select the contents of that layer. And in the mask, I'm going to go in there and fill it with a stronger foreground color of black. And let's say we go with 65 right there. Oop. Click OK. Now we're seeing through it. We're seeing through that car. Okay. Now, you're saying, I don't see through it. That's because all those layers are behind it. Okay. So that's where we have to go in there and do this. Let's go over here and make that the connection and say, give me a merge visible. It creates that guy right there. I'm going to make this a selection, the little see-through area, which I don't see anymore. So let's go find that see-through area. And let me select it. Boom. Okay, see-through. Okay. Make it a selection. And then over here, here's that car. And let's turn everything else off. Okay, right there. And let's turn this background on. Okay, let's get rid of that. Okay, there. Now, I create a mask. In fact, let me create the mask first. Mask. Okay, then we make that little see-through, the selection. And in the mask, I'm going to fill that with that. Let's go with a 50% gray. Click OK. And now you can see that we're seeing through the glass just 50%, not complete. Just enough so that, yeah, there's a piece of glass here, and we're seeing through it to what's behind it. So that mask was able to hide that area of that layer. It didn't do it here. Why? Because all the other layers were behind it. But once I combined them into a single layer, and there's that background, I was able to create a mask. So if we turn off that background, you can see that it's just that area is completely open. And there's our background. That's because I merged it. When I merged it with the background. But there you can see now we're seeing through it to see what's behind it. So masks are really cool and allow you to do all kinds of things. But I suggest you study masks and clipping groups, which is another way of masking things, but we don't have time for that anymore. So let me quickly go in here and open up something else. I got this little salt shaker, and this is to give you an idea of layer styles. Now, layer styles do all kinds of fun stuff. gives you bevels and embosses, all kinds of stuff. But sometimes there's something that comes up that you need something like a shadow. Well, I can go in here and create this whole shadow here, but that little salt shaker is sitting in the scene here. The light's coming from back here somewhere. So it's going to throw a shadow this way. So what I do is I give it a layer mask. I come over here and say, give it a layer mask, drop shadow, right? The light's coming from this side over here. Let's give it a little more distance. See, there's the shadow right there. There's the shadow. So we'll say, do it. Okay, good. There's a shadow. Doesn't quite look the way it should. We want it to be going down this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and go to my layers and go to my layer style and come down here and say, create layer. Some aspects of it, don't worry about it. It's just a disclaimer. You can turn that on. That's because if a particular layer has multiple layer styles and some of them have different modes, once you turn them into their own layers, they might not work the same. That's why there's the disclaimers here. So just say, okay, see, it's its own shadow now. So now I can go in there and say, let's go in there and distort this. I'm going to grab it and bring it. Oops, got the wrong guy. The shadow is what we want. There we go. So now I'm going to go in there and I'm going to grab this little handle here and bring it down here, just like that. Put it in position. Let's pull it out. Let's make it a little longer. Let's pull this out so it starts to straighten up. And we put it in position. Let's bring this guy over like that. This guy there. And maybe we can rotate it just a little bit this way. There's our shadow. See? We got our shadow. So we just use a layer style for something other than what you would expect. We use it to create another element that makes this scene look right. Now, it still doesn't look quite right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in there and give it a mask. Because as it gets further away, it starts to lighten up a little bit. So in that mask, instead of using black, I'm going to use kind of like a gray just to lighten it up a little bit. And I'm going to go from right here. Well, guess what? I guess it's telling me that I almost over. Ooh, time's almost over. Okay, so I'm going to go in here and I'm going to create a little gradient right through here where it's going to just soften it up a little bit. Oop, the wrong direction. Undo that this way. And there you can see that it's going to lighten it up, and let's lighten it up even more. Let's go in here and do, okay. And start from up there. And there you can see that it's just going to get a little lighter along the way. So it looks right. But let's talk about a filter for a second. What about this? So now all of a sudden there's this little shady area here. Okay, well, I've got another file here that I created. Let me move this guy out of the way. Okay. All right, right here. I went in there and I intensified the intensity of these tones. I made them much stronger, more contrast. All right. That's a separate file. So what I'm going to do to the shadow here, I'm going to make sure I'm in the layer itself, right there. I'm going to go over here and use a filter that a lot of people don't even know about. Under Distort, there's this little thing called Displace. Now, I'm going to bump it up a little bit to 15 and 15. Click OK. Now, what it's doing is it's asking me for a map that's going to say what the displacement is going to be based on the values of that map. There's that file that I just talked about. Say, do it, and look what just happened. See how they're now going up and following that thing? Now, I'm going to take that layer and bring down its opacity just a little. And in that mask, I'm going to take my paintbrush, and it's got a soft edge. And let's make sure that it's got spacing. Yes, it does. Okay, and I'm going to go in here, make the size a little smaller. And I'm going to get a nice, go in here and say, with black, and I'm going to use like about a 30%. So you wouldn't see the shadow here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a little tone right there in the mask. You notice I'm drawing it in the mask so that the shadow is not showing up in these particular areas here. See? just there and there. So now the shadow is the way it should be, following that whole little scene there. Okay, now basically I only have a few minutes and I have like 17 other things I wanted to show you. But what I want to do now is I'm going to stop. And here, as you can see, there's a lot more. Time just goes so fast. See, there's more things in here that I wanted to show you. And in demo files, there's a whole other section on brushes. But we're going to forget that. Because what I want to do right now is I'm going to show you a piece that I just completed just about 2 weeks ago. This is a brand new piece. The only people who have seen this are my son and my wife. Nobody else has seen it except you guys. And two guys, Art from and Ali from BenQ, they saw it. But this is a brand new piece. I just completed it. And it's simple. It's just has all the details that you would expect from my paintings, all the lights and so on. But what I want to just very quickly cover here, and then hopefully we'll have some questions, is this marble down here. This marble, how I created that. It's just playing around with filters. There is all kinds of details. This will be on my website later today, so you'll be able to look at it better. And there's a little light up here, all kinds of fun stuff going on. But marble, it's a filters, a bunch of filters, though this particular marble had to very closely match what the real scene is, because somebody in Munich is going to tell me, hey, this is arches in Munich. They're going to say, hey, that doesn't look like the pillars. So I got to be as accurate as possible. But I'm going to create some marble for you. Let me create a new file here. And let's make it inches. Let me go to pixels here, 1500 by 50. Yeah, let's make it square. What the hell? There we go. Nice little square. All right, so now I'm going to pick some colors for my marble. I got black. I'm going to pick some green, a nice green, like about that green right there. So it's going to be like Italian green marble. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here, and in the layer right there, I'm going to go ahead and fill it with that green. I'm going to fill it with that green. Now I'm going to give this layer some noise, or rather, I'm going to give it some render clouds. See the clouds? Look at them real carefully. I'm going to undo this for a second. This time I'm going to hold down the Option button. Remember how it's a modifier? And say clouds. Render clouds. Notice how much more of definition, there's much more contrast. The black is richer and the green is richer. So right there, it changed the way things work. So now that I have those clouds, I'm going to go in here and apply difference clouds, because what we're creating is marble. So I'm going to create render difference clouds. I'm going to hit Command F to do it again. Oh, I forgot to change a few things here. Let's go in here and filter difference clouds again and again. And again, I keep doing it until I find just the marble that I want. One more, maybe. There you go. See? The clouds all of a sudden became a nice Italian marble by just going in there and playing with some filters and playing them on top of each other and so on. And depending on the original colors you use, that's the kind of marble you're going to get. So that gives you a general idea. It's now 1 minute to 5. I'm supposed to end at 5, but we can go a little over. I'm going to stop the share here, and hopefully you guys have some questions.
So yes, we do have one question that came in, and Thomas have asked us the question of, is there, you use a lot of filters. Is there any particular one that you like the most? Any particular filter that, is especially the one you like?
I would say the filter that I use the most is add noise. Add noise. Let me show you why. Let me take the screen back. All right, here we go. So let's start share. Okay, we got this file here. Let's throw this away. Okay, let's just say create a layer, and let me fill it with that black again. I'm going to give it noise. Add noise. And I got a lot of noise. See, a lot of noise. I'm going to click OK. Getting real close. There's the noise. See, all that black and sprinkling of grays. Not much I can do with this. But if I go in here and apply another filter called Blur More or Blur, just Blur, it introduced a bunch of grays. I still got the blacks and whites, but now all of a sudden there's all these grays. So when I pull back, I can go in here and I'll go into levels right here, and I'm going to bring my blacks all the way down, bring the blacks all the way this way, and bring my whites all the way in, right? And what starts to happen is I start to create a star field. See? Click OK, and I suddenly have a star field. Okay? Now, that same star field, I can now go in here and let's invert it. Okay? So now I can go in here. Let's get a little closer. We can see what's going to happen. I'm going to apply another filter. One of the blurs, I'm going to play with motion blur. Now, motion blur gives you that little blur when things are moving. I use motion blur a lot. I've used motion blur, say, maybe 3,000 times in my life. I've only used it twice as a motion blur. What it does is what I need, which is that little streaking. See, I can make a streak a lot like that, right? Or a streak very little, okay, just a little bit. Now, depending on how far I streak it and the colors that I use, okay, let me just show you some places where that's been used. Okay, let me go to art here and go down to Bodega fog, Bodega shadows. Well, what do you know? It's not on this drive, but that's okay because I have this drive. And we go into art and down here to Bodega. Oh my God, I don't have it. Well, anyway, what happens is water. It's water, but actually Fog City will have it. Or not Fog City, but the Golden Gate. We go down to the Golden Gate. There we go. By streaking it just a little bit. Here it goes. This is a big file. There we go. By streaking it just a little bit, I got the water. See? There's the water down there. This is where the sheens are hitting it. There we go. See? That's the water. By streaking it a lot, okay, art, and go down here to Oyster Bar. That's a good one to use. The Oyster Bar. By streaking the noise a lot, I got the wood grains. See? They were streaked a lot, and then they were kind of twisted around and warped and so on to create all the wood grains that we see on that building there. So I would say that add noise becomes the basis for a lot of different things. It becomes the textures on walls and stuff like that. So I would say that add noise is, in fact, my favorite one. Okay. Back to you guys. Any more questions?
Yes, there's one more question. Yeah, I think a lot of us are mind blown by that last demo you just showed us. So Michael asked us a question. You work larger to get the detail, but I noticed you did not make any smart object. How do you get the details when you reduce? So my understanding is that when you reduce the file size down, how do you retain the details that you have in, you know, the large creation, the large illustration that you made?
Well, the details don't get lost. Okay, like for instance, you take remember the 35mm cameras? Okay, you didn't usually use a 35mm shot for a magazine cover, because if you blew it up that big from that little tiny little thing there, you'd lose a lot of detail. It gets soft and so on. Okay, the smaller the image, the clearer and sharper it was. Okay, so I don't lose any detail when I bring things down. Now, I don't use smart objects. Smart objects, because of the fact that I keep all my layers, they're all there, so I can easily go back to the original file and make changes. Smart objects are larger in size. So since my files my working files sometimes are like, for instance, that scene in Amsterdam that I showed way at the beginning. There was trees. Each one of those trees was 5 gigabytes in size, the working files, because of all the branches and all the little branches and so on. So that was pretty big files. If they were smart objects, they'd be even bigger. So yeah, if I need to make a change, I simply go back to the original file, make the changes, then flatten it to a composite file and bring it into the image. And I put it on top. And what I do is I put it in difference mode. That way I can see exactly if it's right where it belongs. And then I put it back into normal mode and it's done. So I don't usually use smart objects. I keep all my layers intact. All my files are completely manipulatable, if that's a word. So therefore, I can easily make changes if I need to. Any others?
I don't think we have any others right now, but I do have a question for you.
Yeah.
With all the details of the work that you're doing, I think some of us would probably have this question too. How do you know when to stop? How do you know when that is enough detail? Because we can go on forever, and I don't think that's the goal, because otherwise we would not be making as many great pieces as you have.
Okay, well, that's a very good question, which people do ask me a lot. And there is a way in which I do this. Okay, let me go back and share my screen here again. So in Photoshop, okay, here's my file. So what happens is I go to on one of the monitors up here, I will do a second version of the same file. So I put that one on another monitor. So it's the exact same files, right? On the viewing monitor, I will go to 100%. There's 100%. This is a 480 ppi file. So it's at 100%. So what I do is I start up here on the upper left and I look for things. I look for things that are wrong. I fix them. I add things in that. This is what I call the composite file. Okay, this is my composite file where all the elements are in place. Once everything is there, I then flatten it and call it the once over file. This is where I make final changes, little additions of dirt and things like that that I think should be there. So I look at things here and I fix them, whatever. Then I come down here and I do those. Then I go down here and I do those. Then when I get to the bottom, I come over here and then I go up and up till I get to the lower bottom here. When I get to the lower right, that means I have seen the entire image in my once over file and I've made any corrections. Once I get to this point, I then flatten any changes that I made and I name it and then I'm finished. So I go through everything. My once over file, I go in looking at it at 100% on a viewing monitor, and on my working monitor, I will have it a full screen kind of a thing, and I'm working, so I can get it real close, but I'm still seeing what I have to fix up there on that other. And as I fix them here, I am seeing it happen on that other monitor up there. So I'm making all these changes. Once I get to the bottom, I've made all the corrections and all the changes, and that's when I know I'm done. Okay, and I will admit there's been twice in my life where I've, there's one more step is I do print it. I have a large 44-inch monitor printer back there. So I do print things large, and then I look at them, I study them. Sometimes I'll see something that I didn't see on the screen because I couldn't see everything together. But when I see it printed, then I can tell if something's wrong. But there have been 2 times where long after I'll look at something and I'll say, I could have done this a little better. So there have been twice that I've actually changed something after it was done. But basically, that's how I know when I'm done, when I get to that lower right corner.
Yeah, it's awesome. So I think we're good with the question. Seems like this is calling for a good follow-up because there's still more that you can still teach us. And I mean, I'm just mind blown. I'm sure that many of you are as well. In fact, I haven't seen that many Adobe Illustrator demos from you before, and being able to see that today was really, it was really inspirational to me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, well,
Um,
people usually associate me with Photoshop. They don't realize that everything starts in Illustrator. So that was my first introduction to Adobe. They called me and say, "Hey, we have this program we think you might like," and so I started playing with Illustrator, which is up there in a cabinet. Illustrator was my first program with Adobe. My first program was Mac Paint, which went on to Full Paint, which went on to Super Paint, which went into Pixel Paint when color came out. And so I've gone through a lot of different pieces of software. And another thing which I've only recently started showing is the preparation, the research. Usually people just want to see tricks, but there's so many videos out there with the tricks that I figured, let me take it a step further into the behind the scenes kind of work that's important with this kind of stuff, which I used to do when I worked commercially as well. I mean, I was creating illustrations for products and stuff, but you got to get that shadow just right, that reflection just right, and other elements in place. And if you're putting this product in some scene, well, the perspective has to be right, or else it's not going to look right. So yeah, there's a lot of steps in the preparation that I think are important for people to learn.
Oh, that's really awesome. We can definitely go on forever. But anyway, Bert, thank you for your time this afternoon. Everyone who joined us, I appreciate you guys all being here. You got so many compliments in this program. For those of you who join us, we'll have the recording for this sent to you later on. And enjoy the rest of your evening, everyone. Thank you so much, Bert. Thank you again.
Thanks. And it was really good to be with you guys. And hopefully I see you again.